Good morning, everyone. Today I'm here to present my research proposal, which is titled as Investigating the Impact of Contextualized Grammar Instruction on Spoken English Proficiency in Grade 9 Rural School Students in Sri Lanka. Right, so here comes the overview. Firstly, I'm going to give a brief introduction. Then I will move to problem statement, research questions, research objectives, literature review, methodology, research analysis, significance of the study, expected outcomes, conclusion, along with the references. So moving on to the next slide. So this is the introduction. English proficiency plays a pivotal role in Sri Lanka's educational and professional sphere. The Silva 2015 emphasized that fluency in English is essential for academic achievements and career progression. However, this is where rural students often struggle, right? Also, rural students face significant barriers in developing spoken English skills. So they lack confidence and fluency, largely due to the focus of traditional grammar instruction, which prioritizes written skills over speaking ability most of the time. So Wijerathna 2018 critiques these methods as outdated and passive at the same time, failing to meet the needs of modern learners. Right? So my study purposes and alternative contextualized grammar instruction. This approach integrates grammar learning into meaningful real-life context, making English practical and relevant. So the primary aim of my research is to evaluate the potential of this method to enhance spoken English proficiency among rural school students in Sri Lanka. Moving on to the next slide. So this is the problem statement. The problem at the heart of this research is the persistent challenge rural Sri Lankan students face in achieving spoken English proficiency. So the problem is traditional grammar instruction emphasizes rote memorization and written exercises. These approaches fail to prepare students for real-life communication, leading to a significant gap in their speaking abilities. The context is in rural areas, exposure to English outside the classroom extremely limited. Wijerathna 2014 highlights that rural students rarely have opportunities to use English in authentic context, further hindering their development. So the need is to address this gap. There is a pressing need for a paradigm shift in English teaching methodology. Context-based grammar teaching, which ties English learning to real-world scenarios, has the potential to make English more engaging, relevant, and effective for the students. Moving on to the next slide. So these are the research questions. So my research is guided by four fundamental questions that explore the multifaceted aspects of contextualized grammar instruction. So the first one is, what effect does contextualized grammar instruction have on the spoken English proficiency of grade 9 rural students in Sri Lanka? So this question examines measurable changes in students' fluency, confidence, and ability to use English in conversation. So the second one is, in what ways does this approach improve the use of grammar in real-life scenarios? So it aims to understand how contextualized learning bridges the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application. So the third one is, what challenges do students encounter in speaking English, and how does contextualized instruction address these challenges? So this explores socio-cultural, psychological, and resource-based barriers. The fourth one is, what perspectives do teachers hold regarding the effectiveness of this approach? So the teacher's insights are crucial for assessing the feasibility, feasibility of implementing these methods on a larger scale, right? So moving on to the next slide. So these are the research objectives. So the research questions which I just mentioned in my previous slides are translated into the following objectives, right? So first one is to investigate the specific effects of contextualized grammar instruction on spoken English proficiency. So this involves analyzing changes in fluency, accuracy, at the same time overall confidence. So the second one is to explore how contextualized grammar helps students to apply grammar effectively in real life context, right? So understanding this linkage is critical for curriculum design. So the third one is to examine the challenges rural students face and how this approach mitigates those barriers. So this involves addressing systematic inequalities in exposure and resources. So the fourth one is to identify teachers' perspectives on the effectiveness of contextualized grammar instruction. So the teacher's experience will provide practical insights for scaling this approach, right? So moving on to the next slide. So this is the literature review. The literature review forms the foundation of my study by addressing three crucial areas that directly inform my research. The first one is traditional grammar instruction. Traditional methods of teaching grammar have been critiqued for their emphasis on written skills and rote learning. According to De Silva 2015, these approaches encourage passive learning focused on grammar exercises that rarely translate to spoken proficiency. So in a rural context, this issue is exacerbated by limited access to English outside the classroom. Wijerathna 2018 points out that rural students already facing systematic disadvantages such as inadequate resources and less qualified teachers find these methods ineffective. So this mismatch between teaching methods and students' needs creates a significant barrier to spoken English proficiency, which is essential in real-life communication, right? So the second one is contextualized grammar instruction. As alternative to traditional methods in contextualized grammar instruction, which integrates grammar learning with real-life situations. Larson Freeman in 2003 advocates this approach, arguing the embedding grammar in meaningful contexts makes language learning more relevant and engaging. So Thornbury 2006 further highlights the advantages of contextualized grammar instruction in environments with limited English exposure, such as rural schools. So he explains that such methods encourage active usage, promote fluency, and also bridge the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application. Also, by making grammar instruction situational and interactive, this approach helps students to develop the confidence and competence needed for real-world communication, right? So the third one is challenges in rural areas. So these unique challenges faced by rural students in Sri Lanka add another dimension to this discussion. Wijerathna 2014 identifies limited exposure to English as a primary obstacle, as most rural students have opportunities to practice speaking outside the classroom. So additionally, Silva and Fernando 2019 highlight socio-cultural factors that hinder spoken English proficiency. So these include a lack of confidence, fear of making mistakes, and also societal stigma associated with speaking English publicly in rural communities. So these barriers emphasize the need for innovative teaching strategies such as contextualized grammar instruction to make English learning more accessible and practical. Right. So in summary, The literature suggests the traditional methods fall short in equipping rural students with spoken English skills. Contextualized grammar instruction, by contrast, offers a promising solution that aligns teaching with students in practical needs. So these insights directly inform the design of my study, which aims to evaluate the impact of this approach in rural Sri Lankan schools. So moving on to the next slide. So this is the methodology. So to address my research objectives, I will use a mixed method methods approach. Right. So first one is pre-test and post-test. This will measure changes in spoken English proficiency before and after the intervention. Also, the tests will evaluate fluency, grammatical accuracy, and also the situational usage. So the second one is interviews. So in-depth interviews with students and teachers will provide qualitative insights into the experiences, challenges, and also perceived effectiveness of contextualized grammar instruction, right? So this combination of quantitative and qualitative data will ensure a comprehensive analysis of the intervention's impact. Moving on to the next slide. So this is the data analysis, right? So my data analysis will employ two complementary methods. First one is qualitative analysis, right? So thematic analysis of interviews will explore recurrent themes such as student confidence, teachers' perceptions, and the relevance of contextualized teaching. So by integrating these findings, my study will provide a nuanced understanding of the instructional approach. So the second one is quantitative analysis, right? So pre-test and post-test results will be statistically analyzed to identify significant improvements in spoken English proficiency. So moving on to the next slide. So this is the significance of the study, right? So this research has three layers of significance. First one is academic impact. So it contributes to the literature on effective English teaching strategies, especially for rural contexts. Findings could inform education policy reforms according to De Silva 2015. So the second one is practical contribution. By bridging the proficiency gap between rural and urban students, this study offers a model for context-based curriculum development according to Wijerathna 2018. So the third one is broad implications. Improved spoken proficiency could enhance career and academic opportunities, fostering upward social and economic mobility for rural students according to Wijerathna 2014. Moving on to the next slide. So these are the expected outcomes, right? So I have got a couple of expected outcomes in my proposal presentation. So I'll be explaining one by one. First one is enhanced fluency. So students will improve their ability to speak English in realistic, everyday situations aligning with Thornsbury 2006 findings. Second one is increased confidence. So contextualized grammar instruction will likely empower students to use English beyond the classroom as predicted by Larson Freeman 2003. The third one is pedagogical insight. This research will demonstrate the need to shift from traditional methods to innovative context-based approaches, particularly in under-resourced rural areas, right? So moving on to the next slide. So this is the conclusion. Right, so in conclusion, contextualized grammar instruction has the potential to transform English education for rural Sri Lankan students, right? So by aligning grammar learning with real-world scenarios, this method addresses the key barriers to spoken proficiency. So this research will provide actionable insights for curriculum developers and policymakers, paving the way for a more practical and equitable English education system. Right, so next steps include finalizing participant selection, conducting baseline tests, and implementing the instructional intervention. So I'm excited to further this vital research. Right, so these are my references, and thank you very much.